If you've ever asked a patent attorney if you can get a patent on your invention, their likely response was, "It depends." And as someone who has been successfully helping clients obtain patents for over 30 years, I know that you probably found this answer maddening because you cannot run a business on "it depends." I'm Jackie Hutter, and this is Winning with Patents. I help founders turn their ideas into intellectual property that actually moves their business forward, be it in generating funding, market share, a stronger exit, sometimes all three. And here's the good news I want you to hold on to. You're being able to obtain strong patent protection for your company's innovative products and technology doesn't have to depend. When patents are done right, that is, strategically, you can effectively formulate your company's patent applications so that they have a high likelihood of being granted, on time, on budget, and broad enough to protect the very thing that makes you money. One quick note before we start. Nothing here is legal advice. I'm a patent strategist providing education to founders, not your patent attorney. Okay, let's get into how you can work with your patent attorney to design your patent applications for Allowance. Start your patent journey with this one idea, because everything else builds on top of it. A patent that issues is not an accident. It is the product of strategic design. I say this to my clients all the time. Proper planning prevents poor patent performance. This means that when my clients and I put in the work up front, almost all of our applications end up issuing in a short window with claims that are strategically broad. And that's not luck, that's intentionality. While I can't guarantee that a patent application will issue, the vast majority of my clients' patents are granted with broad claims in 2 years or less. But here's the catch. To get this result, we have to do the work on the front end. We have to define the goal, figure out what obstacles might be waiting for us in both the prior art and with the likely patent examiners. Once we do this analysis, we can then build a route that gets us to Allowance quickly and at the lowest cost possible under the circumstances. And I'll be honest with you, laying the foundation for obtaining meaningful patent protection is the part most people resist, because this means spending money on preparation work for which a tangible outcome may not be evident. Realistically, however, why would someone not first spend a reasonable amount of time and money before setting out on a patent journey that's expensive to start, expensive to finish, and frankly, really hard to walk away from once you've already sunk money into it? My clients' results show that when you do proper patent planning up front, one of two good things tends to happen. Sometimes you find out that your most likely path to patent protection is actually blocked, but there's another route that gets you to the exact same place. And sometimes you find out somebody already beat you to patent protection, an answer which, while disappointing, just saved you from spending a small fortune chasing something you are never going to own. And I'd ask you, wouldn't you rather know that before you write the check to a patent attorney? Remember, patents rarely matter, but when they matter a lot. So once you've decided they matter for your business, you'd better be sure you're actually going to get one. And that means you design for Allowance. So let me walk you through how I work with my clients to design their patent applications for Allowance. There are 4 basic steps to making this happen. The first step is to start with the customer. Always. Before I'll even begin designing a client's patent application, I make sure my client can show me a validated customer. By this I mean that you have to show me that there is a real person or company who is actually going to buy the product or the technology that this patent is meant to cover. And of course, this validated customer has to be scalable, but we'll leave the scalability issue for a later video. Now, let me unpack why that matters so much, in case it's not clear from the outset. A patent only has value if it covers something that somebody will buy. If there's no product anybody wants, then there's nothing for a competitor to copy. There's nothing to infringe your patent, and your patent, at that point, covers nothing. It's worthless. It's a very expensive, fancy document to hang on your wall. For some people, that may be the ultimate goal. But for most people, the reason they get a patent is because they want it to have business value. So a validated customer is the gate my clients must open before I take their money to draft them a patent application. If there is no validated customer, then there's no reason for me to do the hard work of getting them broad patent protection. But, and this is where I see founders leave an enormous amount of value on the table, that first customer is very often just a small part of your patent story. And if they focus just on this one validated customer, they may be leaving patent scope and money on the table. Let me break that down with a practical example. Say you're the CEO of a startup. We'll call it sensor code. You've built a sensor that measures methane levels in a farming operation, so that a farmer can stay compliant with the regulations without having to keep an expensive chemist on staff around the clock. That's a genuine win for the farmer, and it's a real, validated customer. But if we only write a patent around measuring methane on a farm, we may be capturing just a sliver of what you actually invented. So I start asking the bigger question: where else does methane need to be measured? Well, there are oil fields, there are industrial sites, there are landfills, and your CEO may have no idea those markets even exist because they've only ever been talking to farmers. If we don't capture that broader scope of business value that may be available from your innovative technology in the patent application, then you're just leaving it sitting there for someone else to pick up for free. So step one isn't only go find a customer. It's this: find your validated customer, and then step back and ask the bigger question: how much broader is the problem I'm really solving here? Who cares? Why would they buy? This front-end work is hard, but necessary when you are seeking to extract the full value of your hard work in the form of patent protection. Now, let me draw a quick distinction that matters a lot. This is something that everyone who is involved in the patent process, including attorneys, should understand. But unfortunately, they do not. This is the meaningful differences that exist between an innovation and an invention. An invention is an incremental improvement. Established companies produce these all day long. You can think of them as small upgrades to product lines they already sell to customers that they already have. These inventions are useful, but fairly ordinary in the realm of existing products. Because these inventions are incremental, the patents that cover them are really not that significant. This means that the patents that cover these inventions, while important to protect from direct product knockoffs, are not really hard to draft. I call these sorts of patent applications just the facts patent applications. They generally read like technical diagrams or method flowcharts. In short, they aren't particularly broad for a reason. The products or methods they are meant to cover aren't very groundbreaking themselves. These patents don't take a whole lot of skill or foresight to draft or prosecute. And sometimes, if they don't issue, it's not a big deal because the underlying product or method didn't generate that much revenue anyway. An innovation is a whole different thing entirely. An innovation solves a meaningful customer problem that hasn't been solved before. You may have heard of this in marketing speak as a long unmet need. An innovation is associated with a problem people will pay to have fixed, and it's one that competitors are going to want a piece of the moment they see it working. This means that you can be sure that if you solve this big customer problem, the competition is going to try to get a piece of the action. The patent drafting approach I'm describing today is really built for innovations. And here's the encouraging part that's tucked inside all of this, by way of whether you deserve to get a patent or not on your innovation. If you truly found a significant unmet need and you've solved it, then by definition your solution is novel and it's non-obvious. Nobody solved it before you did, which means you should be entitled to a patent. You just can't assume you'll get one automatically. You have to do the hard work of designing for success. The second step to designing a patent application for allowance is to understand the prior art and then define your invention by its difference from this known set of analogs. Now, prior art is just a patent world term for everything that came before you. every existing method, every patent, every product already out there in your space. And you have to go and look at all of it. Not to get discouraged about what others have done before, but to allow you to develop a strategy for crafting your patent application. The art cited against your application may be close or not so close, but you have to accept that during your patent examination, a patent examiner is likely going to reject your application using some prior art reference. Again, proper preparation prevents poor patent performance. I have a name for how I do this. I call it my Sesame Street approach. And as an aside, I really do think most of what we need to know in life we learned on Sesame Street. You remember the game, one of these things is not like the other. That is exactly what I'm advocating doing as a patent development strategy. I look at the existing ways other people have solved a similar problem, and I go hunting for the patterns, and even more importantly, the differences between how everybody else does it and how my client does it. The good news is that since you have solved the problem in a new way, it usually becomes fairly clear how to distinguish even a large amount of prior art from your approach. This means that you don't have to look at every piece of prior art. Instead, you just need to look at enough to be able to tell the story of why your approach is different. So, let's go back to sensor code. There are, in fact, other ways people have measured methane over the years. So if I file a claim that simply says a method of measuring methane in an environment, I promise you the examiner is going to bury me in prior art, and I'll get rejected. But watch what happens once I've done my homework. Let's say I discover that all of those existing methods are noisy in that they use big, loud machinery. Well, that's not going to work around a herd of cows, because if you stress the animals, they produce less milk. That's a difference. Let's say those older methods only work in a nice, stable laboratory, but my client's sensor has to work reliably out in the field, anywhere from 0 degrees to 100 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a difference. Let's say everybody else needs a big instrument, and my client put the whole thing on a tiny, removable, and importantly, silent lab on a chip. That's a difference. Maybe it's even less sensitive than the prior art versions, but the sensitivity can be just good enough for its intended use on a farm, and with the other benefits of silence, flexible use, etc., it is perfect for the market. And every one of those differences against the prior art is a tool for me in the patent drafting strategy. Each one lets me go to the patent office and say, here's exactly why this problem hadn't been solved before. And here's exactly why what my client did is genuinely new. Because think about it. If those older methods had actually worked for this customer, my client would never have had to do all this hard work in the first place. The very fact that they had to go invent it is the proof that it's novel. Now, I want to share the part that tends to make traditional patent folks a little uncomfortable. Stay with me here, because this is where a lot of the real magic of designing patent applications for Allowance lives. I honestly do not care how long and complex my clients' claims end up being, as long as every single element in them is what I call non-limiting. Sometimes my main independent claim can span a page and a half, and most of my patent colleagues hate this. But this approach works, especially in the world of innovative products and technology. Let me unpack that, because I know it sounds like a contradiction. In the patent world, we are all taught from very early on that the longer the claim, the narrower it is, and the less it's worth to the client. And the AI tools that score patents work exactly the same way. More words, less value. And as a general rule, sure, that's true. But that rule breaks down when the extra words describe things your product has to have anyway. Let me go back to that temperature example for sensor code. My client's methane sensor has to work from 0 to 100 degrees Fahrenheit, because if it doesn't, the farmer simply can't use it out in the real world. So do I mind writing that temperature range right into my claim? Not one bit, because my product has that feature no matter what. That range isn't limiting me. I was never going to sell a version without it. But look at what that range does for me. It cleanly separates my claim from all of that laboratory prior art that never had to survive those conditions. So on paper, my claim reads as nice and narrow and specific to the examiner, which is what helps it move through quickly. And yet, it's genuinely broad in relation to my client's actual innovation, because it covers everything my client would ever realistically sell. That's the whole trick right there. Non-limiting limitations. Words that set you apart from the prior art without actually restricting what you can do. A long claim and broad protection at the same time. So don't be afraid of detail in your claims, as long as what you're adding is non-limiting. Once you see it, it stops feeling like a contradiction. The third step is to design your claims so that they hand the examiner a roadmap to say yes. Here's a reality of the system you should understand. In a sense, patent examiners are incentivized to reject you, excluding all the examiners who think they work for the no patent office. Even the most diligent patent examiners have likely been trained to not allow a patent application without citing at least some prior art against the claims. So even when I feel good about my broadest claims, I go in assuming they might get rejected anyway. And I plan for exactly that when I'm designing a patent application for Allowance. The way I plan for it is with my dependent claims. You can think of those as my backup claims. I quietly load them up with the non-limiting features we just talked about. So if the examiner does reject my main claim, I don't have to get into a long and expensive fight to win an allowance of the application. It's typical that the examiner will spend considerable time rejecting the main claim, but will only phone it in on several dependent claim rejections. This means that I will likely have more than one dependent claim where I can easily argue that the rejection is invalid when that dependent claim is included in the main claim. So, I just fold one of those non-limiting backup features up into my main claim, and we're off and done. The examiner feels heard, and my client hasn't lost a thing, because those features were non-limiting to begin with. And just think about what that actually does for you. It takes a rejection, which is normally a slow, expensive, aggravating fight, and turns it into a quick, planned little move. No drawn-out arguments, no endless amendments, and critically, no accidentally narrowing your protection just to force the thing through the door. You built your exit ramp to patentability before you ever hit the examination highway. The fourth step is my personal favorite. You have to tell a story. I always remind my clients that patent examiners are people. Yes, they're applying legal rules, but at the end of the day, that examiner is the one human being standing between you and an issued patent. So why on earth wouldn't you want them on your side? When you take the time to tell that examiner a genuinely good story, here's the real problem out in the marketplace. Here's why everything that came before failed to solve it. And here's why what my client did is different and meaningful. You make it so much easier for them to say yes. You're essentially handing them the justification to allow your patent. As I discussed in step 2, if you know enough about the prior art, it should not be a heavy lift to give the examiner a roadmap to get to yes. Now, I'll freely acknowledge this may be a controversial approach. A lot of patent attorneys are trained to say as little as possible, because in theory, anything you say in the patent application can be used against you in the examination. And when it's done without the requisite skill, that's a fair concern. I'll be honest with you, some of the worst writers I've ever come across in my life write patent applications. A lot of them read like a technical wiring diagram, and I wouldn't want that person telling my innovation story either. But here's my point. It isn't the patent attorney's job to tell the story. They're not the one talking to your customers. They're not the one generating insights from the market. You are. The business is. You have to make sure your patent team understands the value that your product or technology brings to your customers, and make sure they clearly convey this in your application. I actually learned this lesson from a client years ago. I did a lot of work for a large chemical company that made polymers, the kind of material that ends up in your clothes and your bottles. It's everywhere. It's basically a commodity business in which the cheapest product sold at the highest volumes makes the most profit. And yet, this company was a true innovator. Sometimes they would spend millions of dollars and years of research just to make one small change to a polymer. And that one small change would go on to create huge value for the customers that use their product. Maybe a carpet fiber that stretched a little farther, or a plastic bottle could take a little more heat. And what made them so good at patents wasn't only their scientists and the discoveries that they made. It was the fact that they put a marketing person right on the invention team. So before anything ever reached my desk to draft as an application, their team would hand me not just the technology, but also the reason it mattered. They fully explained to me what the market had been missing and exactly what benefit the customer had been searching for. And the client's front-end work gave me the ability to tell the patent office a story about why this seemingly tiny improvement was both broadly patentable and genuinely valuable to not just the company, but to the customers of the company. We almost always were successful in getting broad patent protection on the company's polymer innovations. This is the model for designing patent applications for Allowance. The business side and the technical side working together, giving the patent strategist a real story to tell. So, own your patent story. That's how you win the patent game. Now, let me bring all of this into the present day because something real has changed, and it's changed fast. Everything I've just described, really understanding the prior art, mapping out all those differences, building a strategic set of claims, and telling a strong innovation story. That used to take days or sometimes even weeks of my time. And honestly, most startups just couldn't afford it. So they'd skip it, file on hope, and cross their fingers. That era is over. I recently helped a startup innovator, one who already had a validated working business model, map out a portfolio of 6+ patents designed to issue in under 2 years in a patent space that is exceedingly crowded. We used AI, but guided by expert prompting. That expert prompting is what streamlines the heavy prior art review and helps us sharpen exactly how their innovation differs from everything already out there. And we didn't just go looking for the obvious open white space. We stood their entire innovation roadmap up against the competitive patent landscape, so we could see what they could own now, and just as importantly, what they could own down the road. And what they got back wasn't some vague report. It was a prioritized, fully actionable list. Here's what you should file now. Here's what to hold for later. And here's roughly what 3 patents or 6 patents or more are going to cost you over the timeline you've set for yourself. That's the shift that's happening right now, in real time. AI is making it cheaper to prepare filings that are actually more likely to issue, and that line up with your business strategy instead of drifting away from it. So this isn't theory anymore. Sophisticated patent strategy that used to be a luxury is now within reach, even for modestly resourced companies. So let me pull all of this together. There are 4 steps to designing a patent application for Allowance. The first step is to start with the customer. A validated customer is your focal point for protection. But you don't stop there. You look past them to the full scope of the value you're really creating. The second step is to understand the prior art and to define your invention by its difference from the patterns and signals you see in the prior art. How is your innovation not like the others? The third step is to design your claims as a roadmap for the examiner to get to yes, with those non-limiting backup claims, so that a rejection becomes a quick, planned move instead of an expensive fight. And the fourth step is to tell a story. Why is this novel? Why is it non-obvious? And why does it solve a big problem that real customers will actually pay to have fixed? Do those four things, and you've taken most of the risk out of the patent application process. And as any founder knows, the more risk you can take out of a business process, the more control you have over how it turns out. Which brings me right back to where we started, and those two maddening words. The next time you're about to talk to a patent expert about getting you a patent, and you feel an "it depends" coming on, ask your team one simple question instead. Do you know these claims are likely to be granted, or are we just hoping? And if the honest answer is hoping, well, I think you deserve a better answer than that. Because your patent doesn't have to depend. When it's done right, success can be designed. That's it for this episode of Winning with Patents. If you'd like to go deeper on how startups can obtain patent protection that meaningfully moves the needle on their business, whether it be for investment, revenue generation through strategic partnerships, or exit, be sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel. If this was helpful to you, do me a favor. Share it with a founder you know who's about to spend real money on a patent. They'll thank you for it. Stick with me. Put these tools to work, and you won't just get patents. You'll win with them.